There is no better person to talk to about scene work than Yossef Sagi. He's been involved in the personal development world for over 20 years. He's a professional dom, he's a conscious kink educator, and the most amazing part is that he weaves these worlds of pleasure with intentionality, with tantra, to create immensely powerful transformations. And honestly, I would know. I hired him over a year ago, and trust me, we're gonna get into all of the juicy details of that and how you can create a scene. So whether you're a dom, a sub, or a switch, you are going to walk away with a new way of thinking about scene work that isn't just about pleasure, it's about healing, it's about transformation. So my lovers, welcome back to Healing with Kink, and let's dive in. So I would actually love to start with how we know each other, our history, how I hired you and all of that work and the podcast, and then going into how powerful your scene work is. And then we'll tell people how they can actually do scenes. Because whenever I start talking about BDSM, people want to know how they can do it. And what better person than you to ask?
Mhm. So sweet.
So a year ago, April, I brought you onto the podcast and was immediately just blown away by something that I didn't know what it was. It was your energy. It was just something that was in you, really. And so I then immediately hired you after that podcast, worked together for 3 months. Was it coaching? Was it tantra? Was it mentorship? I don't even know what word to use. You're like a wizard. And then at the end of those 3 months that were extremely transformational, we ended with me flying out to LA and doing an actual scene with you. Truly, I have told everyone I know about that scene. So that's a TLDR. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I think that everyone who's watching this should go back and watch that first podcast that we did together, because there's something that is activated in you. If there's the before and after of that scene.
I have told everyone I know about that scene. So that's a TLDR. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I think that everyone who's watching this should go back and watch that first podcast that we did together, because there's something that is activated in you. If there's the before and after of that scene, for sure, something like immediate that happened from that scene, but the long-term effects of it are so apparent in the embodiment of how you show up in your life today. And people should just see that. And what I think that is, and we'll get deeper into this, I'm sure later, is using a scene as a permission field for full expression of who you are. You have the same essence of who you've always been, but you are in your fuller expression in so many ways. And it's just apparent from looking at you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to link that up here for those of you on YouTube. Watch that video. Let's backtrack a little bit. And for those of you that people that don't even know what a scene is, what is a scene?
Scene work is the play space of BDSM. So anytime you have a dominant or dominance and a submissive or submissives, if there's more than two people, come together and play, they do it within a very structured container that's called a scene. The scene has a very clear beginning, middle, and end. There's what happens before and what happens after a scene. So there's a very heavy negotiation that happens before a scene, which is like consent on steroids. And it's not just consent. It's about writing the story together. So you write the story, then you play out the story, and then there's aftercare where you reflect on the story. So the scene is the actual playing out part of it.
Beautiful. And how do you personally, for yourself, go about actually creating a scene that's curated to the person? Because the scene that you created to me, obviously, is going to be very different from any other client. And the way that you do it, I just love how you weave in pleasure and transformation and intention. So what's your process?
That's an excellent question. When I create a scene, especially when it's working with a client, I really want to delve deeply into what it is that the client, which is usually in a submissive position, what they want to get out of it. What's the transformation that they're looking to achieve? What is it that they need and crave from that role? And so I ask a lot of questions to dig deeper, because there's always the surface answer. And then there's the answers that come after digging deeper, like what's behind it? What's the why? What's the reason? So once I gather all of that and I think about where they want to be in the scene, what's their ultimate expression, then I look at myself and I think about, who do I need to be to hold the opposite pole of that? What's the container that I need to create that's complementary to their experience so they can step into that full expression within that container? The way that I do that is I usually like having first getting broad strokes over what they're looking to experience, And then I have an 8-page negotiation document that I'll have a submissive fill out. Fuck yeses, the fuck no's, and the gray space in between of what can happen in that scene. They filled it out by themselves, just tuning into their desires and boundaries. And then I'll debrief it with them and get clarification. It's that level of preparation that I do, especially with a deep professional scene, is get the broad strokes, have them fill the document, debrief the document, all of that before going into the scene.
It's so thorough, and I think that's what made me feel safe. I'm curious what it looks like if it's non-professional, if it's just someone that you're playing with.
So I think the main difference between doing a scene in a professional way versus doing a scene with a play partner is when I'm working professionally, my personal desires are not relevant. There's an energy exchange, which is someone's paying me for me to create an experience that's just for them.
Mm.
When I work with a client, I have them fill out the submissive document, but I don't fill out a document as a Dom because there's no need to bring my own desires into the experience. It's about creating a container for them. Whereas if I'm having a play experience, or when I encourage even other Doms and subs to have a play experience, I encourage both of them to fill their own documents on their own and then come with both of their documents to the negotiation table, find a Venn diagram of where there's the overlap of things, and then your scene happens in that overlap, because it's important that both people have their desires considered, their boundaries considered, take into that consideration when making a scene so that it's mutually enjoyable, pleasurable, beneficial to both parties. And of course, even in a play space, you can say, let's do one scene for you and one scene for me and go back and forth with that. That's okay too. But the point is that there is always an energy exchange. So in a professional container, the energy exchange happens transformation with money.
Right.
And then in a non-professional, in a play space, it's more, okay, the mutual pleasure and transformation.
Yeah, that distinction is pretty important. I feel like most people that are following are not professional DOMs and they're just
Right.
want to explore scene work. So let's speak to that archetype a little bit.
Yes.
What would you say to someone like that wants to create a scene? What steps would they take to doing that?
It always starts with tuning in with yourself. Whether you're creating a very complex scene or even if you want to have a very simple play experience with someone else, you've got to come to the table very clear about what it is that you'd like to explore. And even if you don't know all the details, at least come with the questions. Be like, this is something generally that I'm looking to explore. I don't even know what questions to ask yet, but at least come with your basic desires of what you want to explore to the table, so that if you bring yours and they bring theirs, you can have a conversation around that and create something together with it. So one of the things that I think is the most dangerous of stepping into scene work is one person says, usually the sub, I don't know what I want, just create an experience for me.
Mm.
And that's often what you see in a lot of the spaces. You have these like new baby subs, they don't know anything and they'll just go to a Dom and be like, create something for me. And if the person's not a good Dom, they'll just do that.
Right.
And then you don't have the boundaries, you don't have the clarity. Maybe it turns out good, maybe it doesn't. It's sort of like a crapshoot, right? So the idea is if both people have to take responsibility for their own experience before the scene. During the scene, the sub still needs to have a relative amount of self-awareness and, call their safe words if they need to, and all these parameters that you create to make it safe. But they're also going to likely be in subspace. So the Dom has to be like double responsible for their own experience and the sub's experience. But before the scene starts, for sure, the sub needs to be very, very clear, involved, engaged in co-creating this experience with the Dom. You're co-writing the scene.
That's a good point. I was listening to a podcast recently where someone said that the dominants shouldn't feel pressure to deliver everything and everything beyond them necessarily, that it is a collaborative thing. And I want you to go deeper into that, because what does that really look like when it is two people coming together and not just the Dom saying, this is what I'm going to do. I'm planning this entire thing and you don't have to do anything. Because a part of it is kind of that the sub doesn't do a lot, but they do. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the two things that the submissive does is first, they co-write the experience to a certain degree. The Dom has more of the creative flow once the scene starts, and they can go in all kinds of directions for it. And then the work of the sub during the scene is really submitting and trusting, which is the gift of being submissive, is this idea of surrender. You get to surrender. You get to put everything down. You get to put control away. You get to be the receiver of an experience. And those are great gifts. But the work there is you really got to let go. But you can only do that to the degree that you trust your Dom. And the trust is partially built by the communication that happens before. So if you as a sub take responsibility ahead of time and be like, these are things I want to make sure you don't do because they might trigger me. These are the things that I want you to do because they bring something up in me. And you have those communication ahead of time and you're clear that the Dom understands that and they can hold that space for you. It becomes easier to submit. If you do your homework ahead of time, then it becomes easier to just drop into that experience after.
Yeah, that is a
Does that
good
make
point.
sense?
Absolutely. I absolutely like was ringing so true in my body, especially the part about letting go, that it's not passive. It is quite a task to let go. Quite the task. And when I was telling people about my journey hiring you as a Dom, and I told them about submitting and that experience of surrender in my body, a lot of people were like, damn, like, I don't think I can surrender like that. Like, I don't think I can submit like that. And what makes it possible is the trust. Wouldn't have been possible without the trust.
So how about you share what made you feel? Because we hadn't met in person until our scene. We just had a bunch of virtual sessions, right? And then you never actually saw me face to face until I walked into the room.
I'll never
And actually
forget.
didn't see me then because you had a blindfold as well.
Yeah.
So you didn't actually see me right away, right? If you think about that, that's sort of crazy. There's someone you've never met before in person. He's a man. He's a strong guy. I'm in a different city
Different
in an
state.
Airbnb and I'm leaving the door unlocked and I have a blindfold on. That's a tremendous amount of trust. So what brought you to the place where you could trust and surrender into that?
That's a good question. And yeah, for the listeners, the context, Yosef had mentioned to leave the door open and to sit down on the couch and just wait at X time for him to come in. And oh God, I mean, I had so much anxiety in my body, don't get me wrong, but I trusted that I was safe because of the amount of negotiation beforehand. And obviously the 3 months that we worked together, of course. I think also the intention, like I could tell that you were as committed to my growth as I was. And I hope that everyone feels that with their Dom, that you knew the assignment. There was no external agenda. And that again was a question from women that I told about this experience. They were like, "But how do you know that he wasn't going to take advantage of you?" And questions like that, which are very real. But it was never a question that crossed my mind because of the level of intentionality. And within negotiation, we would go back and forth. It wasn't a one-time thing. We talked about that form quite a few times. And actually, I scrolled into our messages. I'll put a screenshot here of that day. And I remember messaging you and I was like, how do I ease these nerves? I'm really nervous right now before you came in. And you said, I don't want you to ease the nerves. I want you to feel into them. Like I want you to embody them. I want you to observe them. And I'm so glad you said that because I feel like I was able to actually then work with what was present instead of stuffing down a very real emotion of being extremely fucking nervous for this experience.
Exactly. And that's so brilliant that you were able to do that work and
Mm.
right, just be with the experience that came up. In the scene space, there's no wrong way to be. There's no wrong way to feel, right? As long as you're working within the consent, of course. There's no wrong thing you can feel. There's no wrong thing you can do. You're being in your expression. You're creating, and it's safe enough for you to experience all of that. And our scene started before, like long before I walked into that room. Like we started it earlier. So you were already in a certain degree of surrender in subspace for I think like 24 hours or something.
Yeah. And actually, I would love if you can go into that because it's a tool that I have taken into my own Dom work is before I meet my sub physically, is we'll go green beforehand and I'll have them like do certain things that really does put them into subspace. So talk to people about that little like pre-scene.
Yeah, it's not something that I always get a chance to do, but if I can, I really love doing it. And you said going green, and just to be clear with everybody who's listening, going green means you start. Like green means go. The scene started. Red is the safe word for stop. Yellow is like pause and readjust. So we went green, which means we started this. I think it was about 24 hours before the scene. And because you had never had this type of experience before, I started to want to work from a psychological perspective on you already feeling the example of letting go of decisions, letting go of control, and stepping into submission and surrender. Now, one of the things that I say is if you're going to make choices for your submissive as the dominant, you better make good choices for them. So I had learned enough about you that I could make choices for you that you would probably have made for yourself. So if I sent you out on an experience to go eat certain foods and try certain things and go to certain places, I chose the things that I knew you may have chosen for yourself, but I did put more control around. I think I told you exactly how many slices of pizza to have and what ice cream flavor to get and exactly where to go. And I even fucked with you a little bit with having you like put your hair different ways and say, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Hairstyle. Right. So to do different things that you feel, oh, like he made good choices for me, that also in certain things, like with your hair where it's not your choice,
Mhm.
right? Just put this style or use this style, different hairstyles, and just have you follow the orders because that puts you into a place of more surrender. So then by the time I came to the room, we had rapport besides the 3 months rapport that we had, but another like 24-hour rapport of being in dynamic where there's a power dynamic there.
Such a good tool, such a good tool. I had a follower recently ask, like, how do you get someone out of their heads? And this, what you're saying is amazing. Psychological domination, I feel like is such a wonderful foreplay.
Exactly. If you don't have a psychological power dynamic, if you don't have a power dynamic put into place, then it's less dom and sub. It's more just what we call topic embodiment. There's someone who does the action, someone who receives the action, but there's no power dynamic there. So when you bring in the psychological part, it helps to increase the power dynamic, which increases the polarity.
Mhm.
And when you increase polarity, it increases the energy that's available there. You know, the stronger the positive pole and the negative pole are, which the further away they are from each other, there's more potential energy in between them.
Never thought of it that way. I love your
Yeah.
brain.
So that's why you need to, that's why you need to actually like increase the polarity. And it happens with more safety. You can increase it more and more. But that's what there's, for instance, one of the things that when you're structuring a scene is you're talking about what Dom sub dynamic do you want to play into? There's a very different energetic between owner pet dynamic
Mm.
or a parent little dynamic or a master slave dynamic or a predator prey dynamic. Each of one of those things have a different energetic polarity to it. So when you think about what dynamic you're creating, you're going to have a different scene. Right? A master slave is a huge power dynamic as opposed to
Right.
like a parent little, which is a smaller power dynamic.
Can you give an example of both so people can kind of visualize what a scene of master
Yeah,
slave versus parent little would look like?
sure. Absolutely. So I just want to be clear when I speak about parent little, it's different than age play. We're speaking about an energetic dynamic. Some people like to do age play, which is, you know, you're going to play like a little boy or a little girl, and maybe it's a scene with your mom or your stepfather or whatever, or something like that. And that's a certain way to play. But that's more role play. When I speak about a parent little dynamic, it's more energetically of what is the energy between a parent and someone that they take care of. It's something that's nurturing and strict at the same time. There's like a lot more love and guidance. Whereas if you have a master slave dynamic, it's more strict, it's more directional. There's less of a nurturing component. It's more of you are here completely in my service, right? So there's more of a power dynamic there
Mm.
energetically. Again, it's not necessarily role playing a taskmaster, slave driver, right? But it's the energetic between and same with like owner pet, right? There's a different way that you take care of your pet than you take care of a child. A child has more of their own choice that they can bring into it that a pet can choose. A pet needs a little bit more hands-on attention, right? So these are all different types of dynamics to play into
So different, drastically different. Tie
from
it all
each other.
back. How would something like this be healing? How is that transformational for someone?
So again, it's coming back to what are they coming in with and what are they looking to transform? And then from there, you can decide on the dynamic. So for instance, if I'm working with a client who never really felt parented, they had like absentee parents, right? Who weren't really there for them, who either didn't give them the boundaries or didn't give them love, right? So maybe that's what they're going to look to explore in the scene. Maybe they need a stricter type of parent, or maybe they need a more nurturing and loving type of parent energy in the scene. So that's something that we can explore in the scene. You know, a kid that maybe is like a spoiled teenager and their parents just let them do whatever they want might crave direction, boundaries, discipline. Like that's what they want. Or someone who got too much of that. I crave the parent who creates more spaciousness, freedom of expression, right? But still, it's still a parent energy. So it's blending it.
What about with master slave? How would that be transformational for someone?
What I tend to find is people who have a tremendous amount of power in their life crave submission and people who don't have that crave to be more dominant. So if you see people who maybe they're running a business, they're in charge of a lot of different people throughout the day, they're giving them direction, they're making choices for everybody else. At the end of the day, they're like, I just want a space where I don't need to choose. Right. So sometimes the people who crave to be in a slave role are actually the most powerful in their life because they never get it. They just want, like, just take all my choices away. And that would be a great space for master slave type dynamic.
I always get so mind blown by these conversations because it's the places that one would never think to find healing. One would never think to find healing in BDSM or sexuality. Well, most people will say, don't look at this avenue as that. When I obviously transformed so much with you, what I found most fascinating was that after our session, I didn't go out into the world then and think like, okay, remember embodiment of surrender. Remember this, remember being confident. Like I didn't have to think. It was just a form of my being. There was no like steps after. It was truly coming from within. Why do you think that is?
You can't direct yourself to a destination you've never been. You don't know where it is. So sometimes we need a reference point. So when you came in before to that scene, there were certain experiences you had never have had before, certain feelings in your body, certain levels of surrender, certain levels of pleasure that you just never experienced before. So you know that they were possible. But what you got in the scene is a reference point that you can now orient towards. You have your inner compass, but the inner compass needs to find where to orient. So now you're like, oh, I know what surrender feels like. I know what pleasure feels like. Now I can get myself there.
Right. Oh,
You're creating that reference point inside of yourself. So you don't have to know because especially as a sub, you usually lose the sense of self to a certain degree,
oh yeah.
but your body remembers the experience. Even
Mm.
if your mind doesn't remember all the details, your body remembers the experience and then you can orient towards. And something similar that happens to people when they use plant medicine. So like one of the things that I learned in plant medicine was like, I was like tried to do self-love, but
Mm.
I couldn't quite get there because I hated myself because it was very self-loathing. It's how I grew up. And then I had this one plant journey where I just loved myself so much. And I was like, oh, that's what it feels like to love yourself. Okay. Now I can do the work and orient towards it. Oh, that's what it feels like to surrender. Oh, that's what it feels like to have a full body orgasm. How would you know what that's like until you have it? So you got to have your first, and then you can orient towards it.
Yeah. Well, it's like you're bypassing your prefrontal cortex. So you're not like thinking about it. You're just feeling about it. Wow. Well, that's beautiful. You are an incredible scene work master. And I will forever appreciate what you did for me and what you continue to do for people. Let's say that someone has gotten all the way to the end now and they're excited to play and create a scene. Let's speak to dominant. What does this person now do to begin crafting that scene?
So that's a great question. So you've done the negotiation, you've got the document. This is where you get to be an artist. I do feel like the dom is the artist of the scene, whereas the sub is a muse, a canvas to work onto, but the dom is the artist. So what I like to do after the negotiation, I look at the document, I look at some of the things that are important for my sub, and I write down some beats, things I probably want to hit during the scene. What are some experiences? Is it a certain type of impact play, a certain type of psychological play? Like, what are the things that were like the fuck yeses? Let's see how we can use that. And then I take a look at what are the things that are the fuck nos and make sure that they're not in the scene. And then we look at the gray space, which is the space where if it was, I would like to try it, but it's edgy. So in the negotiation, there's also a conversation of like, when do we step into the edges and when not, or what's the safety that needs to be created? So start looking at those and how to fit them in. I sort of lay my beats down on a sheet and I start shuffling them and seeing what's a good story to tell. The story is the story of like the experience that comes through the body in waves. So it's a combination of like highs and lows of safety and danger. And like any good story, it comes to a denouement and then there's the resolution. Like I really think about it in terms of a hero's journey that my sub is going to go on and I craft it out for them, whether it's role play or just energetically. And then I think of like, who do I need to be in order to energetically, what's the archetype I need to step into to complement their archetype and what they want to experience. So if they want to feel loved, I've got to be super open-hearted. If they want to feel humiliated, I've got to be cruel. So like, what are the archetypes I need to step into in order to complement theirs?
Yeah.
And I work on embodying those before I step in and I meditate on that. And then step into the scene. And when you're in the scene, one thing I request I make ahead of time, this is not just when I do scene work, this is for almost anything, is this is something better. Like universe, I've done my prep work, seen me do my part. Now I surrender to how you want to work through me. And I let something bigger work through me, because there's like moments that I haven't all planned out, but they come intuitively through the connection of the dom and the sub, and something, this third force of the universe of something bigger that works through us in that space. And I surrender into that, even as a dominant, and let that work through. So it's the combinations of preparation and then my own surrender.
You're like a channel.
That's where I aim to go. And that's where I am when I do my best scenes.
Amazing. You know what would be so cool is if one day you like recorded a scene and had a course and just showed people like, this is what a scene could look like with me. Then they could just see how fucking amazing you are.
Could be possibly coming soon. That's a great idea. I would love to do that.
Yeah, it'd be, I mean, also for the voyeurs that just want to see what happens.
Oh, there's plenty of places to be a voyeur to watch me in action.
Actually, good segue to the closing out here. Because Yossef has a mystery temple coming up. It is not just your regular play party. It is, what is it, Yossef? Tell us.
It's not a play party. It's a personal development workshop. It just happens to look a lot like a play party. So it's a space for people to come and learn about themselves through the lens of their sexuality, eliminate shame, reprogram, and it's a high opportunity, zero pressure environment. So you can end up in a scene or an orgy or all types of different experiences, whatever's most healing for you. Very high in consent. It's a sober environment. So it's very intentional. Everyone knows exactly what they're doing, and it's very, very safe and very fun, because I do believe that the best personal transformation comes through pleasure, even if that pleasure looks like pain sometimes.
It's the best. Amazing. Well, comment Mystery Temple below if you're on YouTube so that Yossef can send you this link. It's going to be January.
The next one's January 18th. We could put a link for people to just get on my mailing list in general for all upcoming events, but the next particular one is January.
Amazing. I hope I can make the next one in January. Where can people find you? Your Instagram, website, email?
If you spell my name right, you'll find me everywhere. So it's yossefsagi.com, or it's at Yossef Sagi on Instagram. It's YOSSEFSAGI.
Amazing. All links will be in the bio, in the comments. Thank you so much, Yossef. You are an incredible man.
Thank you for having me. You're an incredible one. I loved that conversation so much, and I really hope you did too. So drop a comment if you did. Let me know what you want to see next, and head over to this playlist for every single thing that I'm going to be uploading in the world of kink and in the world of BDSM. Until then.